I was dozing off on the sofa in the evening when the doorbell rang. I shuffled to the door in my slippers, and the tipsy Marvin stumbled in. His young secretary was struggling to support him. When she looked up at me, she fluttered her eyelashes and charmingly brushed aside her bangs. Ding! Wisnovel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Marvin had a bit too much to drink today, so he asked me to bring him back. She emphasized the words asked me as if she were the hostess. Nicole, could you make a pot of sobering soup for Marvin without adding longan? He doesn't like it. She blushed and smiled shyly. He always wants it the morning after he gets drunk. I found it somewhat amusing. The newly graduated girl's attempt to assert authority was quite clumsy, making me not even want to compete with her. I took Marvin Burden from her and said casually, "All right, thank you. Do you need me to call a cab for you? A pretty little girl like you, he's not worried about you going home alone in the middle of the night. How can he be so inconsiderate?" Shane Webster's expression changed, and she fell silent. I couldn't be bothered to say more to her, so I closed the door and nudged Marvin Burden, who was leaning on the sofa, with my foot. Enough with the act. Marvin Burden didn't open his eyes, but there was no hint of drunkenness in his tone. Thanks. She's been a bit clingy lately, always wanting to marry me, so I thought I'd cool her off for a while. I remained silent. Shane Webster was different to him. Over the years, Marvin Burden and I went our separate ways. Women came and went by his side, the longest lasting only 3 months. He was naturally fickle and never wanted to stay too long with one person. Back then, I thought I would be the exception, but after only 3 years of marriage, he couldn't resist wandering outside again. Shane Webster, on the other hand, was different to him. She had been with him for 2 years already. It was clear that Marvin Burden truly liked her. If it were someone else, he probably would have replaced her long ago. This time, he just wanted to cool things off. Obviously, he couldn't leave her. In the past, I would have cried and made a scene, heartbroken. But now, I just said expressionlessly, "Marvin Burden, let's get a divorce." Marvin raised his eyelids to look at me, chuckling. "Nicole Murphy, what's gotten into you again? We agreed to live our separate lives. Why are you acting out now?" He turned on his side, his long legs bending at the knees on the carpet. He casually reached out and held my hand. "Okay, I admit I was wrong today. I shouldn't have let her bring me back. She's just a young girl who doesn't know any better. Don't take it out on her." I pulled my hand away, took out a divorce agreement from the drawer of the coffee table, and placed it in front of him. "I'm serious. I fell in love with someone else." Marvin finally opened his eyes reluctantly, but he still had a lazy and disdainful look, as if he was convinced that I was just causing trouble again. He casually flipped through the divorce agreement a few times, but his expression slowly hardened. I leaned over to sneak a peek, afraid that he wouldn't understand. There are a total of 17 houses, including the ones in Australia and the United States. I had them valued. I have 8 and you have 9. And the company, I own 22% of the shares. You can have the first right to purchase at market price. The rest is not worth much. We each take our own. What do you think? Okay? If not, I'll have the lawyer add more. Marvin slowly sat up straight. The laziness on him disappeared in an instant, and he gathered an oppressive aura once again. "Nicole." He raised his head to look at me, a hint of cold light flashing in his narrow eyes behind the gold-rimmed glasses. His eyes were light in color, especially under the light, staring at people with an inorganic indifference. "Are you serious?" Of course, I was serious. I had mentioned divorce before, but that was years ago. Back then, in order to force Marvin to come back to me, I tried everything, crying, making a scene, even threatening to commit suicide. But this time, I really wanted a divorce. "Nicole, what do you want this time?" Marvin threw the agreement on the coffee table, looking a bit annoyed. "Shane won't affect your status. Why can't you tolerate her?" He thought I was causing a scene because of Shane Webster. Indeed, when I first found out about Shane Webster, I did have a few fierce quarrels with him. At the most serious moment, I smashed everything in the house, sat in the debris with my hair disheveled like a madwoman. I threatened to cut my wrists with broken porcelain to force him and Shane Webster to break up. It was useless. He still stayed with her. I shook my head. I used to have a love-struck brain, as humble as I could be. I hated myself for thinking about it and wanted to go back in time to strangle that pathetic self. Not this time. I raised my head to meet Marvin's gaze and smiled at him somewhat embarrassedly. It's the man outside who insists on marrying me. There's no way for me to handle him. It was difficult to see such a blank expression on Marvin's face. After a moment, his expression finally turned unpleasant. "Nicole Murphy, I've already said it. Shane Webster won't affect you. There's no need for you to overthink it." But he still didn't believe it. I couldn't help but laugh. "In that case, you can have a larger share of the assets. And how about the villa in Australia belonging to you? I'm in a hurry here. Consider it as a mental compensation for you." Marvin stared at me firmly for a while, as if confirming that I was serious this time. He squinted his eyes, his expression suddenly becoming profound and unpredictable. "Is it the man who escorted you home last time?" I nodded. Luther had escorted me home last time, and Marvin had seen him once. Luther even greeted him with a smile. At that time, Marvin's face couldn't hide some discomfort, but he didn't say anything either. After all, the idea of seeing other people separately was proposed by him. Over the years, he had been practicing it himself, so he had no qualifications for double standards. Thinking of Luther Holland, a smile couldn't help but appear on my face. Today at the seaside, he took out a ring. There seemed to be a 1-carat diamond on the ring, but compared to my other jewelry, it was just the most inconspicuous size. I thought it was fake and didn't pay much attention. Yet, he earnestly knelt in front of me. The ring might be a bit small. Please don't dislike it. This is the money I earned from work. I originally wanted to save more, but I couldn't wait any longer. Nikki, divorce him. When proposing, people usually say, marry me, but he just directly said, divorce your husband. I couldn't help but laugh and cry. Just as I was about to brush it off, Luther grabbed my hand and wouldn't let go. The sea breeze carried a damp freshness, his black hair stuck to his fair forehead, his eyes pure and bright, reflecting an entire me. The young man's love burned like fire, regardless of the occasion, with the courage to burn everything. In that moment, I was suddenly infected by his courage too. A voice emerged in my heart. It was my own voice. I was already 29, entangled with Marvin Burton for 9 years. How many more sets of 9 years do I have in my life? Do I have to continue like this for the next few decades? The wind howled, the waves crashed against the rocks on the shore, splashing snow like foam. After a long time, I heard my own voice. Okay, actually, I started to regret coming back. Marvin Burton and I have been together for so many years, dividing assets would be a complicated matter. For both of us, it could be considered a bone of contention. So over the years, we tacitly did our own things, but we never mentioned divorce. But thinking of Luther's gaze, I felt a secret of excitement and a sense of liberation. Perhaps it's time to start a new life. He's still young, I smirked. He gets what he wants. If I don't agree, he'll get angry again. You should understand me, right? I looked at Marvin. Shane Webster is the same way, isn't she? Marvin's brows furrowed, revealing an unmistakable gloominess. Nicole Murphy, are you really serious? It is embarrassing to admit that I am serious about a man who is 8 years younger than me, but I nodded nonetheless. Luther Holland is different from others. This was something Marvin told me back then when I asked why he had to be with Shane Webster, a helpless smile in his eyes. Shane is different from others. His others naturally included me. I didn't expect to be the one saying this now. Marvin paused for a moment, a storm brewing in his eyes, his fingers slowly tightening, knuckles turning a shade of blue. He sneered, Nicole Murphy, you are regressing more and more. What can that little brat offer you? He gestured with his chin towards the coat casually draped on the sofa behind me. After working for a year, can he afford this coat of yours? That wasn't a lie. Over the years, although Marvin's heart wasn't with me, he was still generous materially. I could swipe his card casually, and when luxury goods arrived, I didn't even need to look at them myself. The manager would bring models to try them on for me. It's no wonder that Shane Webster was striving to replace me. The life of a rich wife was indeed extravagant. I touched the inconspicuous diamond ring on my hand. It was an ordinary brand, average clarity, and average setting. It was something that would never appear in my jewelry box, but I liked it more than all the others. It doesn't matter. I don't care about these things. Marvin obviously noticed the diamond ring on my hand. The diamond ring he bought me initially was a $7 million pigeon egg, exquisite and deliberately brought back from Hong Kong. This ring was so precious that I couldn't bear to wear it. However, after the initial good years passed, we started to have different dreams under the same roof. Or rather, he unilaterally grew tired of me. He stopped wearing the ring because the young girls outside didn't like it. In some argument at some point, I angrily took off the ring and threw it away. Later, that ring was never found again, and my hand has been bare ever since. I repeated, Marvin Burton, let's get a divorce. He paused for a moment, then suddenly rushed forward. The coffee table was knocked over by him. The vase fell to the ground, shattering crisply. I was startled, but he grabbed my neck tightly. He bent down, his eyes full of fierceness. Nicole Murphy, who allowed you to take this seriously? Who allowed you to fall in love with someone else? I was shocked and immediately pushed him away. What the hell is wrong with you? Rubbing my neck, I complained. Everything was fine. Why are you suddenly acting crazy? Marvin steadied himself after stumbling a step, picking up the divorce agreement. Am I crazy? Do you know how much property we'll have to split if we divorce? Just the villa you mentioned is worth $120 million. You don't even want money for the divorce. Is that man so important to you? I pondered for a moment and nodded. Yes. It's not that I'm in love, but the half I'll get after the divorce will be enough to support me for several lifetimes. No matter how rich I am, I can only sleep lonely on the bed. So why should I be tied to this relationship for money I can't spend? I've made up my mind. Even if it's not for Luther Holland, I don't want to torment each other with Marvin Burton anymore. Marvin tightly held onto the divorce agreement, crumpling the thick paper in his grip. He's always been calm and composed, never showing any emotions even when I went crazy and yelled before. But now, he seemed extremely angry, with a dark cloud over his face. I could even see the bloodshot eyes. Just when I thought he might attack me, Marvin suddenly took a deep breath. He pushed his glasses, clenched his teeth, and returned to his usual rational demeanor. His eyes were heavy, devoid of any emotions. He tore the agreement to pieces in a few swift motions and threw it away. Dream on if you think we're getting a divorce. Marvin stormed out, probably going to to find Shane Webster. I lay half leaning on the sofa, covering my eyes with my arm. A message from Luther arrived. Did you ask for a divorce from him? Is he giving you a hard time? I didn't reply. I didn't know how to respond. Suddenly, I felt a bit weary. How did we end up here? Initially, Marvin and I were deeply in love. Back then, he had no money, and after work, we were both craving so much that we finally bit the bullet and bought a hamburger. He handed it to me. You eat. I refused, and after a little back and forth, we ended up each taking a bite from opposite ends, slowly eating towards the middle. He stuffed the remaining filling into my mouth. During our wedding, he was as excited as Luther now. Back then, he didn't have money like Luther, and the engagement ring was so small that you needed a magnifying glass to see it. He hugged me and excitedly said, "Nikki, I'll be good to you for the rest of my life." At that time, I believed him. We loved each other so much that growing old together seemed like the natural course of events. But later, I realized that people's hearts are the most changeable. At that moment, Marvin probably genuinely wanted to be good to me for a lifetime. Later on, he genuinely wanted to be good to someone else too. In the 3rd year of our marriage, he came back with the lingering scent of Chanel. Tears streamed down my face as I questioned him about it. He hugged me, swearing and promising that he had just taken clients out for dinner, and he never betrayed me. I believed him. Then it happened a second time. A third time. He slowly lost patience and stopped comforting me, just impatiently pushed me away. Men have to socialize outside. Can you stop being so unreasonable? Later on, he got involved with Shane Webster. She was a girl who bore a slight resemblance to me, but much younger. Fresh out of college, full of youthful vigor, she was someone he brought in against the norm. Marvin started not coming back night after night. I knew he was disgusted with me. With such a young and lively body around, why would he come back to sleep by my side? My heart slowly burned to ashes night after night. So when he said to me, "Nicole, I think we should try an open relationship. You can go out and find other men freely. I won't interfere with you. And you shouldn't interfere with me either. Of course, I won't let anyone outside shake your position. How about that?" I looked at Marvin. The man in front of me no longer had a shadow of the boy who would share a hamburger with me. Perhaps he was just my fantasy from the beginning. Time didn't kill him. Time just revealed his true self, the side of him that I never truly saw. After a long time, I closed my eyes. Okay, my acquaintance with Luther Holland was an accident. At that time, I was spending Marvin's money every day to hire male models in order to retaliate against him. One day, I was drunk and disoriented. Despite 5 batches of male models being presented to me by the manager, I found none satisfactory. Feeling annoyed, I pushed the door open to go to the restroom, and there I bumped into Luther Holland. He had just finished playing ball and came to sing, still dressed in his sports jersey, with his sweaty bangs grabbed behind his head, revealing a young and upright brow. In that instant, I was completely captivated, grabbing him by the arm and expressing my dissatisfaction to the manager. "With such a handsome man, why were you hiding him from me? I want him." That day, I was indeed drunk. I almost have a blank memory of what happened next. I only remember pestering Luther, asking him how much money it would take for him to go out with me. It wasn't until the next afternoon that I woke up, finding a message from an unknown number on my phone. "Are you awake?" Later, I found out that I had insisted on giving Luther money to leave with me when I was heavily drunk. I directly took out $50,000 in cash from my bag. "Is this enough?" He insisted on returning the money to me. I had no choice but to meet him in person, apologizing profusely. "I'm sorry, I drank too much last night. I'm not usually like that." Luther's face turned red, like a young bride who had been wronged, trying to appear calm, but still stuttering. It's fine." While racking my brains on how to apologize to him, I looked up and noticed that he was wearing our school badge. Turns out, he was a junior. Upon further inquiry, I discovered he was already a senior, and his thesis advisor happened to be my classmate from university. After that incident, Luther would send me his thesis-related issues directly. Gradually, we became acquainted. It was easy to fall for someone like Luther Holland. He was good-looking, with handsome features exuding a pure and vibrant aura from head to toe. When he smiled, his eyes sparkled. He was the kind of guy who would invite me to the boxing gym to see him spar, a clear and slightly foolish male college student. Having spent so long in the shadows, it was only natural for me to yearn for someone as warm and sunny as him. When Luther confessed his feelings for me, I agonized all night, eventually telling him about my situation. "I don't want to hold you back. Let's forget about this. I'm sorry." Luther didn't reply. For the next 3 days, he didn't contact me. I thought he had given up, and I felt a bit regretful. I really liked him. Little did I know, on the 3rd night, he called me directly to meet up. I must have been out of my mind to get up in the middle of the night and sit in his beat-up car, listening to him scold me. Luther looked serious, hands clasped together, and said earnestly, "What you did was wrong. You hurt my feelings." I nodded. "I'm guilty. I deserve to die." He frowned. "It's not that serious. You already apologized to me." I thought about it for a long time, and I think I can accept it, but you have to divorce that person as soon as possible. He was like a meticulous little dog, seriously contemplating a grave matter and providing what he believed to be the perfect solution. I chuckled inwardly. Okay, I'll do as you say. As for the divorce, I hadn't really made up my mind all these months. But now, I have. I want a divorce. Not for anyone else, but for myself. During the company's annual meeting I attended as a shareholder, Marvin Burton stood in the crowd, attracting everyone's attention. Beside him, Shane Webster was holding his arm, smiling gracefully, exuding the aura of a queen. The manager on the side glanced at me, feeling embarrassed, and didn't dare to speak. I remained expressionless. In the past, Marvin would always bring me along to such events, because we agreed that we could have fun with someone else, but not cross the line. This time, he brought Shane Webster with him, probably as a retaliation for my previous divorce proposal. But I didn't care. I hold 22% of the company's shares, second only to him. I don't need a man to showcase my status. It was Shane who noticed me and walked up to me with a smile. Nicole, why did Marvin let you come alone? I assent he worried about your safety on the way here at night? How careless of him. This was what I told her last time, and I didn't expect her to remember. She really held a grudge. I took a glass of champagne from the waiter's hand. I have a driver at home who drove me here in a Rolls Royce, so there's no danger. Miss Webster, you're overthinking it. Shane's face changed suddenly, turning red and then pale, as if she had been rubbed on a pallet. I was about to leave when she suddenly grabbed me. Shane's disguise was completely torn off, and she sneered. Yuri, just an old woman without love. What are you pretending for? Marvin has said he's not interested in you anymore. He will divorce you sooner or later. I was somewhat surprised. Marvin still liked this kind of woman as always. Kindly speaking, she was naive and innocent. Unkindly speaking, she was all looks and no brains. I glanced down at her. Well, she wasn't even that well endowed. Shane was hired by Marvin as a secretary right after graduating. Although she was called a secretary, everyone in the company knew the kind of relationship they had, and they all gave her some face. These years have made her more and more arrogant. I firmly held her wrist, smiled, and said, first of all, whether to divorce or not is our family matter. It's none of your business. Secondly, you seem to have forgotten that I am a member of the board of directors of the company. I can dismiss you at any time.